I'm SollyJo, and today I'm going to show you how to decorate and upcycle a beautiful secretaire like this. Now it's quite damaged, but I love the shape of it. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to be applying decoupage. Now this is the Posh Tea Time in A1 by Posh chalk. There we go. And because it's a very translucent paper, the first thing I'm going to do is paint the surface in white. That will make the colours on the decoupage pop. So stick with me and let's have some fun. So before I start painting this, I'm actually going to take that border off. I don't want that border on in here. For that I'm using just a simple water pen. So I'm just ripping it apart. It gives me a frayed edge, which is easier, as Patty said, to blend in when I start with my blending in with my paints. Right, so that's what I'm left with. I'm just going to pop that to one side for now, which is not a bright white, it's kind of an off-white by La Magic paint. And this will just give me a great background for the decoupage. I'm going to quickly dry that off. So I'm going to be applying her with the Posh chalk pigments, if I can find them. There we are. So I'm just applying it over just a very thin layer. I see lots of people putting a lot on underneath the decoupage. You don't need to. This is just a layer so you can place your paper on there. I'm just popping it on there. Just getting that edge on. Getting all the creases out, and then I'm going to pull it up, and as I'm pulling it up I'm stretching it and getting rid of all the creases. I've got a crease there, so I'm picking it back up. As long as the infuser stays wet, you can do this quite a few times, as long as the top of your paper is dry. It needs to be dry. So your brush needs to be dry as well. So there we are. It's best to start in the middle and work your way out. And pop some more infuser on the surface. If I'd have done it all in one, the infuser would start to dry and I wouldn't have had as much time to work on the surface. And I'm just getting it into all those little returns of the drawers, and it really is about just going over the entire area quite firmly and brushing out all those bubbles and creases. And the Posh chalk decoupage is great for this because it's flexible, and it will flex and expand into nooks and crannies and round some corners. And with me misting the surface, it's really helping the infuser really get into that surface, infusing into that surface. And this is where I'm going to start stretching the paper now into those nooks and crannies, into those returns of the drawers. So there you can see, guys, that is a perfect, even though I do say so myself, that is a perfect decoupage application. Now when you're drying off decoupage, if you do force dry it, make sure and you do it with a heat gun, make sure you've got at least 10 inches, maybe more, between the surface and here, because it'll start drying it and it will start bubbling. It is good if you can, thank you Donna, it is good if you can just let it dry naturally. So there we are, the 1261A, and as I said, I'm going to be cutting this middle piece out here, and I'll probably put that at the bottom of the piece, but I'm going to be using these scrolls here. WoodUbend is a composite wood. In its cold state, it can be drilled, it can be sanded, painted, stained, And the magic with these things is when you warm it up, it becomes like a flexible plastic, and you can shave it, cut it, bend it round corners. You can do lots of lovely things with it, and you can also adhere this to just about any substrate: stone, plastic, of course wood, and even glass. And there we have the first scroll. Right, so you can see the mess there. I'm going to let that cool down, and then I'm going to show you how you can sand these down. Isn't that beautiful? So you can shave these. See that, guys? Shaving that. I couldn't do a perfect cut when I was cutting it out, so I'm just leveling it off with this knife. Still not smooth enough for me, so I'm going to come in with some 80 grit sandpaper. And that's brought it back to a nice shape. And that's still a bit rough, so I'm now going to come in with my 240. Making that as smooth as a baby's bottom. There you can see how nice and smooth that is, and that's because the 3rd generation WoodUbend Mouldings are compressed so much you can get that fabulous finish on them. Not as risky as a heat gun. The heat gun is faster, but you can risk singeing or burning your WoodUbend Mouldings because it's just like wood. The hairdryer, you don't risk singeing or burning them, it just takes a lot longer. The other way you can heat them up is on a griddle. I'm going to pop this on the griddle so it's nice and warm for us to work with. It'll save us a bit of time. Spread the glue to the entire footprint of your moulding. Do not use PVA, it is not strong enough, and do not use 2-pack, it is brittle. I don't care what anybody else says out there and what they're using. A good quality wood glue is the best glue for these specific mouldings. I think it's going to be a little bit more elegante to place them there. Push those up a little bit. This is going to be, I'm going to make this into a Baroque piece. It's going to be really heavy, guys, but that's on the outside of the mouldings where I've moved it. And then for the more tricky parts, I'm going to come in with a wet paintbrush. Not too wet because it gets really mushy and it goes under the water, goes under the moulding. Not that it's a big deal, but it just may take the mouldings a little bit longer to dry. Now this glue will dry transparent, okay? So if there are residue, if there's a bit of a residue left over, that's okay. What I want to avoid is having big chunky pieces of glue drying on the surface. Now I'm just pushing it down, and more of the glue is extruding from under the surface. That's okay, it just means I've had enough glue and I'm getting rid of what I don't need. You know what, I think I'm going to get some colours out and just try on one side. Yeah, let's have a bit of a blend. Now, when you're painting WoodUbend Mouldings, guys, always spritz your surface. Spritz the WoodUbend moulding, it just helps the paint get right into those nooks and crannies. Just a little bit, and I'm just going to blend that in to see if I can get the exact same colour as the decoupage. If I can't, that's fine, I'll just start painting on the actual decoupage and making it my own colour. But I'm actually doing a rather good job of getting the colour of the decoupage here. And if you do go with your decoupage paper, that's absolutely fine. You've got the infuser on it, which is like a sealer, and just wipe it back off. As long as it's still, the paint's still wet, that'll just wipe back off your decoupage. always remember to warm your WoodUbend up, no matter if you're placing them on a flat surface or a curved surface. There it is, nice and warm. Time to get the glue on now, so we can apply it to the surface. So to apply your WoodUbend mouldings, always use a good quality wood glue. I'm using the WoodU glue by WoodUbend, a specially formulated wood glue. And then activate the glue by heating it up ever so slightly with a hairdryer or a heat gun. Just until it gets a little bit tacky. And then you can pop your WoodUbend onto the designated substrate and press down. Now, whilst it's still warm, I can move it around in situ to get it into the right position. Pressing it down, and then I'm going to come back in with my heat gun and heat it up once more. So now that the 1261A is on the surface, I'm not going to throw this board away. Do not throw these boards away. They're great for mixing paints on, decanting your glue, making a mess, lots of uses. So I'm getting the WoodUbend nice and warm now so that I can slice through them in order for them to fit on this panel here. I'm also keeping in mind that I've got my hardware is going there, so that fits quite nicely in that space. Obviously I will be cutting through these, I'll be warming them up and cutting through them so that the drawers can open. Good idea, if the drawers open, nice and functional piece of furniture. I am here putting the WoodUbend up. I'm just going to cut through my decoupage as well, again so that the drawers can open up. In order for you to cut through your decoupage, guys, it's got to be nice and dry. If it's still wet, it will be soggy and it will tear. Let's go to the other side now and apply the WoodUbend moulding. Decided on the shape and the pieces that I'm going to be using. I'm going to warm up all the WoodUbend moulding and stick them in their place. So stick with me. Just getting rid of all the surplus glue. Now none of these are fixed down to the surface. I just wanted to get them all on the surface with the glue ready to go so I can start moving them in situ whilst they're still warm and tacky. So I've now decided on the exact arrangement, and I'm going to come in and heat them all up again in situ and press them down and wipe away any excess glue that is still remaining. WoodUbend now on the surface, it's time to stand her up and start with the fun part, which is painting. So this is the part where we open up the drawers. It took a couple of minutes to get them open, and we're going to start tidying all these edges up here. So you can see the WoodUbend here, I've made a really rough cut. I'm just going to come in with my 80 grit sandpaper because it does need filing down quite some way. I'm going to go over all the edges, all around the WoodUbend. Now some of these pieces may come off in the process, that's absolutely fine. Like this one for here, for instance, that's hanging off. I'll take that off, warm it up and pop it back in place. I'm also sanding down the decoupage here, making sure that it's all adhered to the surface. That'll give me a nice smooth edge when people open and close the drawers. So now all the WoodUbend are on, it's time to do some painting. I'm going to start on the side here where I've got the panel all set up. I'm using my WoodUbend brush here, my Posh chalk brushes. This is great for getting into the nooks and crannies of the WoodUbend mouldings. I'm using magic paint, the pepper blue, which is one of the new colours. But before we start, I just want to talk about the WoodUbend a little bit. Because they have a lot of nooks and crannies and a lot of detail here, it's always good to have a water mister with you. And just spritz the WoodUbend ever so lightly. That helps the paint move in and around the mouldings. So now I've got all the WoodUbend mouldings covered in the first coat, and I'm going to start mapping out the colours for the blending process. I'm going to be blending Olivia, this beautiful pea soup. It's pea soup, isn't it? Coming into the centre and making that as solid as I can. And then I'll start incorporating the blend. Now this is not going to be perfect because this is the first coat. I'm just mapping out my colours at the moment. And then whatever's left on my brush of the Olivia, I'm just dry brushing over the detail. I always come in with a dry brush, a Posh chalk smooth and blend brush. I'm just going to lightly brush over the surface of that blend, and there we have the first coat. So I'm now going to move, whilst that's drying, I'm going to move on to the legs. Now I've already done the other side, so I'm going to do exactly the same on this side, and it's basically the pepper blue, and then it's going to fade down into Olivia because it's a ball and claw. So I'm using a stippling motion here. And when I get down to a certain point, I'll start blending the Olivia in. And for stippling, our Posh chalk stenciling brushes are actually really great. So I'm just loading my brush up, getting rid of the excess, and then I'm just going to come up and feather that into the paint. So as the brush is coming up, it's collecting this wet paint up here, and it's mixing it in situ. This is just one way of blending. This is a stippled blend. A bit of highlight in there. So I'm going to let that dry, and we're going to move on to the front now. I'm starting off with my pepper blue, and I'm just going to come around the edges of the WoodUbend mouldings. Again, I'm going to be spritzing to help that paint get into the nooks and crannies. Now here I've run into a problem, it's getting too blue, so I'm just going to take a little bit of Olivia and mix those colours in situ until I get a background of my pleasing. Now the great thing with the WoodUbend, with the Posh chalk decoupage, is that you can make them your own. So if you wanted a black background, you could literally sit and paint around all these lovely shapes and get a different background. It is entirely up to you. So now we're going to blend the paper into the actual woodwork and paint, and I'm going to be using all these beautiful colours. I'm just going to be stippling, mixing things in. I'm going to be using various different brushes to get a nice smooth transition that I would like. So, mapped out my colours, I'm going to leave that to dry. And the paper down here, as you saw when I applied it, is hanging off. So the best way to get rid of that is to use a piece of sandpaper. And I'm just going to come in and sand downwards, not upwards, because I'm scared of lifting the paper. The drawers, now I've used my colours and I know what the shapes and the tones I want, I can now come in and blend those in. So there we have it, there's one drawer. I'm going to go and do the other drawers and then we will talk about stenciling. So onto the stenciling now. We're using the Posh Chalk Moroccan Vibes. It's a very handy A4 stencil, a Mylar stencil, nice and durable, and as long as you wash these and hang them, when you finish with them, they will last a very long time. I have put some spray on the back, mountable glue, and I'm going to start off slap bang in the middle there. So I'm going to be using a combination of pigments and paints, and the pigments I'm using are new bronze alloy. I'm just decanting some onto the WoodUbend board. You can create your very own consistency. I always advise that you put your pigments, you decant your pigments, and then you add the Posh Chalk infuser gradually. Now, people ask me a lot about the infuser. What's different with the Posh Chalk infuser to other mediums? Well, you can use this outdoors, so the infuser can be used outdoors. It arrests the rusting process of the pigments. So if I didn't use all these pigments today, I could use them. I could put them in a little jar and use them again in a couple of months. They don't corrode. And you can see I am creating my own consistency here, and that's dependent purely on the amount of Posh Chalk infuser I've added to it. Liquid gold. So I've got my pigments mixed now, and I'm going to be using an assortment of colours down here, and I'm just going to come in and make a palette again using my WoodUbend board. It's various colours. Are we ready for the stencil reveal? Let's see what we've done here. Ooh, you can see we've got all the different shades in here. So I'm just going to quickly dry that off. So that's nice and dry, and I can now come back in. These stencils are really good, they are all repeatable. And I'm going to fade it all out as I'm getting further up. Sorry. So I'm just going to repeat that process until I've got the whole panel done. So what I'm now thinking is that I need to go and clean my stencil straight away. Always clean it straight away. Here you go, my love. So I'm now going to go around all the WoodUbend mouldings and dry brush over very lightly with the Posh Chalk pigments. So this side is now ready. We just need to look at the feet, the claw and the ball and claw feet. I'm going to do those in pigments as well, but I need to get this baby back up on the bench to do that. So let's swing round to the front. On the front I'm going to be using the pigments I've just mixed, and I'm also going to be using some of the Posh Chalk aqua patinas. So I'm using the primary green. I'm going to be using the Prussian blue, that goes with the pepper blue magic paint. Using one of the Precious range, the Radiant Gold, which goes with the colour of a dress. So I'm going to start with the darker colour first. I'm just going to brush over the top. This is just making a base layer for the rest of the highlight. Now I don't want to cover all this lovely blending up that I've done here. I'm going to come in with the green now in just specific points. Now the previous aqua patina is still wet, so the blue and green will mix in situ, and as you can see I'm getting some interesting shades of the green and the blue. Now the aqua patinas are really great because they are water based, so if you don't like what you've done, you can always go over them, you can paint over them, and they're exceptionally easy to use, and they dry within half an hour. So I'm going to go straight onto the Radiant Gold now, and here where I've got this yellow going on from decoupage paper, again where the two aqua patinas meet, they're mixing in situ, and just look at those beautiful hues I'm getting there. And it's helping the highlighting transition across the surface to match the blending underneath. Now I don't like this line I've done up here, so I'm going to incorporate some of the Royal Gold into my decoupage paper, and for that I'm going to use a stencil brush. So just by introducing another stippling pattern here is going to help get rid of that harsh line there. And that's it. I'm now going to come back in with my pigment, the bronze alloy, and I'm just going to go over the very peaks of the WoodUbend Mouldings. So I'm going to get on with the other side now. I'm going to do exactly the same as I did on the left hand side, the stenciling. So these were the existing hardware. I think they're really pretty. I'm not going to change them. They've been scrubbed nice and clean. I'm just going to dry brush over them with the pigment. So we've got this lovely claw and ball going on here. I'm just coming in with my pigment mixture and colouring the ball part in. It's a little bit rough, but that's okay. It will get covered in a dark patina with a brown wax, the whole piece. So any imperfections will get covered up by that. That's the beauty of upcycling. Now it's time to seal the piece, because this is magic paint, it's a chalk paint, and it needs sealing. But before I seal it, I feel there is an element of depth missing, so I'm going to add that with the Posh Chalk Aqua Patinas. This is one of our new colours. It's the black. Again, it is water based. And I'm just going to come in around these edges. So I'm using my water to feather that out. It's a water based wax. It's giving us a nice discreet shading there. So I'm going to go all the way around my piece, all the way around the detail, using the same process. Now I'm going to seal all the shading in. The aqua patina has been applied with water on here, so there is kind of a sealant, but just to make sure, I'm going to add some patina extending wax. It's just a Posh Chalk clear wax, just to give it that extra layer of protection. I'm going to do exactly the same thing on the sides. Leave it to buff up a bit, then it'll be ready to photograph. So my friends, that's it, I'm finished. In fact, I'm not finished. I've still got the top to do, but because I'm going to do that with our new Athenian plaster, which is a self-polishing furniture plaster, that will be for the next vlog. Hope you've enjoyed it. I have. I think it's really cool and I know it's going to sell exceptionally well. Thanks ever so much for joining us. Please remember to like and subscribe at the buttons wherever they are, left, right, down below. I'll see you next week. Love you loads. Bye.